Good evening, Sharms Espina here for Monique Tuzon, here to give a recap of the major global events since the middle of last week, the newsmakers behind them, and stories of human interest that lift our spirits, keep our sanity intact, and help preserve our trust and belief in each other. We begin with a break everyone on the planet has been waiting for in Israel's war of annihilation against Hamas in the city of Gaza. Friday last week, after painstaking efforts of the Egyptian and Qatari governments to intercede on behalf of Israel and the United States, the release/swap of hostages for Palestinian prisoners finally took place. And on Friday, November 24th, under a 4-day truce, both Israel and Hamas signed off on. The first batch of Hamas hostages received their freedom from captivity, to include a baker's dozen of Israelis, 10 Thai nationals, and a Filipino citizen. This release was followed by 39 Palestinian prisoners held in prolonged detention, also set free by Israel, much to the relief and delight of their Palestinian families and friends. With the first day of the truce an astounding success, the next 3 days proceeded on schedule, save for a snag here and a snarl there, and both Palestinians, Israelis, Americans, and the entire world lauded the successful swap. And as nearly all successful ventures are rewarded, this one needed a follow-up, an encore, and a sequel. And so even before the deadline expired, all parties and persons involved in the deal scrambled to extend it. And they did. A 2-day prolongation was agreed on, and to date, at least 81 hostages have been released. In addition, as of this writing, 2 Russian women not accounted for among the 240 hostages have been reportedly set free. It has become increasingly clear how Hamas, the extremist and terrorist group, is in control and dictating most of the conditions on the release and swap of hostages for Palestinian prisoners. The most salient one: children and female hostages get first dibs, with the men, Americans, and captured IDF soldiers at the back of the line. The terms for their release will be entirely different, with more prisoners for one hostage definitely to be demanded by Hamas. Only 2 Americans, both females, and the last one being a history teacher and tour guide in Jerusalem, have been set free. Their families, kin, and friends have upped the pressure on the Biden government to do even more to expedite their liberation from captivity. This is the price to pay for President Joe Biden's perceived insensitivity to the plight of innocent Palestinians who've been killed in weeks of indiscriminate and unforgiving airstrikes unleashed by the IDF. The death toll is astounding. Nearly 15,000 Palestinians and Hamas fighters slain, of whom 4,000 are women and 6,000 children. His full support for Israel's vindictive and atrocious bombing has been assailed, even by Democrat party mates and from all over the planet, who clearly see the overkill and the excessive suffering born from the disproportionate retaliation by the Netanyahu government on the Palestinian people. Meanwhile, the release of 2 Filipinos, the second one a female domestic helper/caregiver believed to have been dead all along, brought great relief and joy to the president, whose team in the DFA and DMV, among others, worked tirelessly with the Israeli government to see them through. And the president expressed his delight and heartfelt appreciation to all who made it happen. And elsewhere around the planet, 17 Filipino seafarers and the rest of a 25-member crew are put out of harm's way after Houthi rebels take over the cargo ship they were riding on. According to the Department of Foreign Affairs Undersecretary Eduardo de Vega, the rebels targeted the ship but did not harm the crew. The Israeli Defense Forces called it a very grave incident of global consequence. And at this point, let's turn to VOA's Chris Casquejo for a brief rundown of events that have obtained lately in the Asian continent.
Why Indonesia's critical mineral resources could be key to U.S. green energy ambitions. Welcome to VOA Asia Weekly. I'm Chris Casquejo in Washington. That story is coming up, but first, making headlines. The truce between Israel and Hamas continued into a 7th day Thursday as the original 4-day truce was extended. On Tuesday, Hamas released 2 more Thai nationals. Other former hostages and the Thai foreign minister greeted them at an Israeli medical center. This follows the release of 17 Thai nationals on Sunday through a separate arrangement with Bangkok. A surge of respiratory illnesses, including pneumonia, among Chinese children is flooding Chinese hospitals. The World Health Organization said this is not a new virus, it's caused by the flu. The Chinese Health Ministry is urging people to wear masks and called on local authorities to focus on preventing the spread of the illnesses. Japan said Thursday it has asked the U.S. to stop all non-emergency Osprey flights over its territory after a U.S. military Osprey aircraft carrying 8 people crashed off southern Japan during a routine training mission Wednesday, killing at least 1. The cause of the crash is unknown. Search and rescue efforts continued Thursday to find the 7 remaining crew members. North Korean state media reported that a North Korean satellite has photographed and sent back detailed images of the White House, the Pentagon, and U.S. aircraft carriers at the naval base in Norfolk, Virginia. The existence of these images has not been independently verified. All 41 construction workers trapped for more than 17 days in a collapsed mountain tunnel in India were successfully rescued Tuesday. None of the workers sustained serious injuries. Joyful locals, relatives, and government officials greeted them with celebrations, setting off firecrackers. The officials hung garlands around the workers' necks, while the crowd cheered in relief. U.S. President Joe Biden will not be attending the 28th United Nations Climate Change Conference, or COP28. But U.S. diplomats will be there, interested in getting access to the critical mineral exports necessary to transition to green energy. VOA's Jessica Stone reports.
When you drive a Tesla, the world's largest producer of electric vehicles, you're riding on a battery powered by critical minerals. Lithium from Chile, cobalt from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and nickel from Indonesia. Currently, China dominates the market for the extraction and refining of these critical green energy battery components. But in November, Indonesian President Joko Widodo told business leaders that Jakarta wants to become an alternative partner of choice.
As home to the largest nickel reserves in the world and other critical minerals, Indonesia is in the process of building an EV integrated ecosystem and aims to produce 600,000 electric cars by 2030.
Bakri Group CEO Anandia Novian Bakri wants to take advantage of that pledge. He's pivoting his family's traditional Indonesian energy mining company into a renewable mining company that can also exploit the growing demand for a non-Chinese critical mineral supply chain.
If you want to focus not only to the east, to the west, there is not only market, but also enthusiasm, capital, and technology. So that's a good thing.
Indonesian mines are already partnering with Chinese refineries to process their minerals. Bakri says Jakarta needs support from Washington to compete. In November, Widodo met with U.S. President Joe Biden to negotiate a critical minerals trade agreement that makes Indonesia eligible for U.S. subsidies under the Inflation Reduction Act. But Southeast Asia expert Greg Poling says there's a long road ahead to approval.
Members of both parties on the Hill have been clear that any future agreement with Indonesia or other major mineral suppliers has to involve a lot of progress on labor and environmental standards, and may have to involve some kind of separation of the supply chain to make sure that Chinese companies working in those countries can't find backdoors to sell and qualify for IRA subsidies.
In the meantime, Jakarta is making progress on reducing Beijing's dominance in refining critical minerals. In 2020, it banned the export of nickel ore, and Indonesian law requires companies which mine to also refine domestically. Jessica Stone, VOA News, Washington.
Visit voanews.com for the most up-to-date stories. I'm Chris Casquejo. And now, a new innovation in Thailand. Thais have given an eco-friendly digital spin to the floating basket festival. This year, children made virtual rafts and sent them floating down digital rivers. Thanks for watching VOA Asia Weekly.
The developments over last weekend have long been overdue, and it is in the best interest that this cessation of hostilities extend definitely to liberate more, if not all, hostages and let in more trucks delivering badly needed relief items. But Hamas and Netanyahu and his hawks in his war cabinet are focused on death and destruction towards each other. And this has been Charms Espina for Monique Tuzon, reminding you all to always wear a smile, count those blessings, give thanks, keep fit while you catch the news right here. An eventful weekend to you all. Good evening.